Do I need to call Mr. Murphy?
I talked about that.
He knows.
Who?
You're gonna die.
I don't know where Mr.
How old are
Murphy's
you now,
at.
Dale? How old are you now?
Did you forget about 8:30 meeting?
I
Coach, I'll
I
talk.
can't believe you're still alive.
You talked to him?
Think somebody out there still
Wanna
alive?
wait just a minute?
Treats his wife bad, abuses her.
We'll give you just a second.
You look good for 48.
By the way, I told my family that struggle joke when they died.
Listen, you ain't gotta hang around for Ronald. He's gonna be here forever. When Ronald dies, I'm going to the funeral home. I'm gonna touch him because I don't believe he's dead. I'm gonna go up there and poke him.
Hey, wake up.
Hey,
It's time to go deer hunt.
hey. Yeah. Take a big old buck and walk by him. I'd probably pee my pants.
I'll make sure.
Robbie, you do
Yeah.
Why did the
Yes, sir, boss. Old Tommy had 6 septic tanks. Tommy had 6 septic tanks the other day.
David Moore.
They
has
delivered
one.
them to his house instead of the What job. 6 houses in a row.
Dad jokes, David.
I think I can know myself 2 minutes.
Ready? Okay, we're gonna bring this meeting to order at this time. Commissioner Hollingsworth, the pledge and invocation.
Let us pray. Lord, thank you for this day and thank you for all the things you've done for us. I want to thank you for protecting these families from COVID and making the ones that had problems and were negatively impacted whole again. And we bless them and their loved ones. And I want to pray for the commissioners here today. Make sure we make the right decisions. We vote for the right thing, not just something else. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Staff, any additions or deletions?
Yes, sir. We have a couple time-sensitive issues we'd like to add. One being a presentation by the county clerk of courts, Mr. Jay Swisher. Second one being a job description for the purchasing officer. We have a vacancy that we need to fill, and so we want to get the new job description approved so we can get it advertised as soon as possible. And then finally, we have one deletion. We'd like to take the appointments to the Planning and Zoning Board and pull them from this agenda and put them on the next agenda so they could be under discussion for the board to consideration.
Okay. Commissioners, y'all got anything else? To the agenda?
No, sir.
I move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Let's let me, you got, wait. No, you can wait till we get to that subject. That's not my problem. Okay. All right, so let's move on to Dale Williams, Lakeshore Hospital Authority.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, staff. For the record, my name is Dale Williams. I wear a number of hats, but today I'm here as the Executive Director of the Lakeshore Hospital Authority. And I'm here to ask the Board of County Commissioners, as a recently appointed court receiver for the authority, to adopt an operating budget effective for the fiscal year beginning October 1st of 21 and ending September 30th of 22. a standard fiscal year the same as your own. A few housekeeping items before we get into the actual agenda. One, there are differences, though there are a lot of similarities between the authority as a special district and the Board of County Commissioners, which is a political subdivision. One of those is that we are required by law to use communications media technology. The purpose of that was a lot of special districts are multi-county. So it only makes sense with today's technology that somebody who lives in Taylor County that may want to participate in a water management meeting should not have to drive all the way to Suwannee County. Even though the authority's limits are Columbia County, there was no exceptions made in the communications media technology requirement. So we do honor that because we are required to legally. In order to assist us, because we do not have at the authority an IT department, we contract with a company called the NOC, N-O-C. And this is the reason you see Mr. Carl Plingy. Carl, raise your hand. Carl is conducting this portion of the meeting as communications media technology, as we are required to do by law. So there will be a portion here in public comment where you can ask if anybody is watching by CMT that wants to ask a question. But having said that, the rest of the agenda is pretty much the same and will be conducted the same as you would most any regular meeting. Okay. All right, our agenda for today, Mr. Chairman, is first, there are no additions or deletions on the part of staff. I don't know if there's anything that any member of the board would like to add, but we certainly have no additions or deletions. And if there are none on your part, we would ask that you adopt the agenda.
Mr. Chair, I move to
adopt.
a second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And again, just as a reminder, during the public comment portion, in addition to those who may be here in attendance, it would be appropriate, Mr. Chairman, if you would ask Carl if anybody is wishing to ask a question online. But with that, we can accept our public comments.
Do we have anybody in the audience want to do any public comment? Come on up. 2-minute time limit.
Good morning, Commissioners. My question is, and maybe I missed it, maybe I didn't have my glasses on right. What I wanted to find out in this operating budget, if it states the expenditure given to Fred Coberline, the board attorney. And that comment would go to Dale, unless you guys see what legal services he provides. Since there's not a board, why should the board be paying $750 a month to Fred Coberline? And I did not see that in the salaries.
Would you like for me to answer that now, Mr. Chairman, or when we present the budget?
Yes, I think the answer's pretty obvious, but yes, I think we should answer.
If we look at the operating funds, we have budgeted for legal services for the coming year, $30,000. And then we do have an aging history, which has been supplied to you to give you about 4 or 5 years worth of history. And just like you budget, we budget based on past expenditures, plus anything that we may expect is going to occur in the coming year.
But in other words, Dale, that is a history. You went back and sort of took a snapshot of what you paid in legal fees to arrive at that amount for your budget.
We did, and when I put the budget together, because we're in a receivership situation, I just assumed there could possibly be some added expenses from the legal side. So we increased it just a little bit for that reason. but like any other public budget, any unexpended funds are returned to reserves.
Dale, is it safe to say that, because you're in receivership, you still have to do a budget with the anticipation and belief that you may get a board back and come out of receivership?
That is correct, Commissioner. Not only is that correct, but we really are bound to do that legally. Currently, you are basically setting in place of the authority. And until it goes through a decertification process, we have to abide by the same policies and practices that we have historically done. So you have it on both sides.
That provides some information. However, the bottom line is Fred Coberline going to be paid $750 a month when he acts at the discretion of the board. And there is no board. You guys are the one that can.
Obviously, the attorney for the authority is Fred Coberline Jr. Mr. Coberline has a continuing services contract with the authority. He will remain the attorney for the authority. In his contract, he has a $750 monthly retainer. This is not the first time that Ms. Limley and others have expressed concern about it. It is a contract that was approved and entered into before my tenure. I do not know exactly what the discussion was amongst the authority members at the time when they entered into that agreement. I have heard the explanations when these questions have come up before in authority meetings, but it is a valid contract. It is a requirement. I have never found any provision anywhere that says that that's inappropriate or was inappropriate for the authority at the time they entered into the agreement to not include a provision like that. So it was approved. It's in good standing. It will be paid until such time as a change in contract occurs or the authority is decertified.
Thank you.
What Dale said is accurate. There is a contract. However, if you've ever hired an attorney, you can ask Foreman. You put down a retainer, it usually buys down. I got a divorce, had to give the guy $5,000. When it got down to a point, you had to give more money. But this contract, he gets $750 a month. It never goes down. It's not against services. I think it's wrong. And Dale was not there. And the reason this was initiated, Jack Berry had left and Coberline told the board he needed that money to field questions from the authority board members. And I just think it's not the right thing to do when he gets paid for doing nothing because he acts at the discretion of the board.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions from Mr. Williams?
Carl, do we have anyone? Okay, we have no one, Mr. Chair, that is wanting to ask a question online. So if it's your prerogative, we will move on with new business.
Yes.
Okay. Specifically, and again, I am here to ask you as a receiver for the authority to adopt an operating budget for the hospital authority. And just some brief history here, just to kind of keep things in perspective. Our budget at the authority has 5 funds. I haven't looked at your budget lately, but I would imagine you're close to 20, 15 to 20, somewhere in there. So we have the 5, and we're going to talk about those and what each fund does. And I promise to be as brief as I can. The statute that we adopt the budget by is 18906 subparagraph 3. It basically has the requirements for how many days prior you have to advertise, how long you have to post your budget, and et cetera. In our particular case, there is no millage levy. Now, just where you will know, when the DR 420s first came out for this fiscal year, we did not have a quorum. So as the executive director, I certified what was last year's millage, which was 1/10,000th of a mill. When it became time to certify the final millage, we did not have a quorum. And so my legal opinion is that we could only basically certify we did not levy a millage, which is correct. So do not expect for the authority to be an even listed taxing authority on the next bill. We were the past year because we levied the 1/10,000th of a mill, but we should not even be on the bill for the coming year. And I've just given you the reason why. We do not have the millage levy, therefore trim laws, truth and millage laws do not apply. And I personally called the Department of Revenue because there's a couple of firsts here for me. One is I've got 32 years of direct experience in public administration dealing with public budgets and another 6 years beyond that. I've never presented a budget anywhere where a public hearing was not required and trim laws did not apply. So it was new territory for me. So I called, I got an understanding. I wasn't quite sure that I understand what I heard. So I did ask Richard Powell to call behind me, and he did. And he come up with the same interpretation of what we were told. So we're trying to make sure that we dot every I and cross every T, but it is new material and a new process for all of us. I've never presented to a receiver. I've never in 38 years presented a public budget where we didn't have to have certain things, but we don't have a millage, so trim laws don't apply. I mentioned earlier about 18906. It says, okay, you got to post this stuff 2 days prior to adoption. You have to adopt it by resolution, and we have to post it on a website 45 days after adoption. So we're going to do that. Now, I think this is important. Our resolution does not include reserves. It includes appropriations only. So if you would like, Mr. Chairman, you would like to write this number down. As of September 30th of this year, the Lakeshore Hospital Authority had in cash $22,190,296.68. $22,190,296.68. So because we don't have millage, we no longer have lease income because we lost our tenant, the budgets that I'm about to present to you are going to be funded using those cash reserves and whatever interest is expected to be generated from those cash reserves. And as you'll see when we get into the revenue side of these budgets, much like you do not receive a lot of revenue from interest from your investments, neither does the authority. I think most of that money is generating about, 0.25%. The good news is most of those investments are short term. They're 18 months or shorter. That's kind of a two-edged sword. One, if we got a really good rate, we would want a longer period of time, but the lending institutions don't want to give you much more than that because the rates have been volatile as far as going down. So we're limited where we can invest the money, just as you are, and we're not generating an extreme amount of interest. For the most part, our average rate for our CDs and investments is about 1/4%. So that's where we're at. Okay, this was the letter that I sent David, and I think everything in that letter I've just covered, but if you have any specific questions, I'll be glad to answer them as we move into the actual budgets themselves. The first budget that I would like to present to you, the first fund, is the hospital operating fund. We do not call this a central budget, but it's as close to a central budget as you're going to get with the authority. This is where all the office expenses are paid. This is where the cost of the actual administration building that we're in is paid from, and et cetera. You will notice that the way this budget was funded is we put in $65,000 in expected interest revenue. The balance is going to be funded from the actual cash reserves, and the total budget is going to be for this fund, $394,410. I will point out, because people always ask during budgets, the staff of the authority consists of 2 full-time employees and 1 part-time. As the executive director, I am the part-time employee. My contract is an hourly contract. I cannot exceed 28 hours a week. And I've been the director for a little over 3 years, and I have never billed for 28 hours. I've never
Dale,
reached.
excuse me, Dale, could you hold on just a minute?
Sure.
Mr. Looker, could you have a seat, please?
Yeah, I'm trying to put in the.
No, you need to get here on time if you're gonna do that. Please have a seat. You're interrupting the meeting.
Oh, you parked on outside.
Please have a seat. Go ahead, Dale.
But anyway, I wanted to mention, the 2 employees do not have a health benefit, such as we do not provide medical coverage directly for them. We've attempted to do that. So has the prior administration. We just can't get favorable rates for a group that small. So their salaries were increased again before my time in order to sort of compensate for that. Other than that, they get standard benefits. They're members of FRS. They're both in the regular retirement class, and they get their match on their Social Security. I think our holiday schedule is exactly the same as the county's. As far as I'm straight hourly. They do have to pay on me because of FRS requirements. There's a special class in FRS. Now, I retired from the county. I get a retirement from FRS. I cannot re-enter FRS, but they still charge the authority that's the smallest of those accounts just because I work for an FRS employer. We've tried to eliminate that. And though it's not really a lot of money, it's money that you would prefer not to spend, particularly that nobody's going to benefit from it directly. So, but that's basically the staffing, and that's my arrangement. If you have any questions about this fund, I'll be glad to answer it. The next fund, Mr. Chairman, is the Hospital Services Fund. This is the fund that we would use when services were provided at Lakeshore and they billed us for the clients that we had. We would pay them from this. We also had some on-call doctors who would actually do patient visits for our clients while they were in the hospital. Now, obviously, we have no hospital. CHS moved on. We will be paying any contractual obligations we have with the medical center out of this fund. And so for the coming year, we figured we would put a couple of $100,000 in this fund. I would be surprised that we would spend that, to be perfectly honest, but just in case, we did put it in. Now, when CHS and other providers were operating the hospital, there were years that their billings could be as much as $70,000, $80,000 a month. It hasn't been that way in a few years, but if you're looking for a range, back in the peak when Lakeshore Hospital was fully operational as a hospital and they were billing the maximum amount they could to the authority, it could easily have, those bills were easily $70,000, $80,000 a month or even more. In fact, I think they were more. One year there, about $1.5 million was paid to the hospital. But that has not been the case in the last 3-4 years, but it used to be that way. Okay. The
Dale,
next,
how many clients is enrolled currently?
about 90 right now, about 90. And I think at its peak, it was 400 plus. I think at the peak it was 400 plus, but it's never been that number since I've been there. In the 3 years I've been there, I want to think the maximum we had was maybe 140. And now it's down to 90.
Is there any continuing contracts there with any of the local clinics or what have you, other than the hospital?
Yes, sir. And that's this actual fund we're talking about, Commissioner.
Okay.
We still have primary care clinical contracts. We have like 4 or 5 different providers. And we still, of course, send our clients to them. We also pay for pharmaceuticals that we supply out of this. I would like to clarify, there's a specific list of drugs that the authority will pay for. They won't just pay for anything. Now, they have made some modifications to that program. The idea being if one of our patients goes to the doctor, that doctor writes that patient a prescription. We don't want to have to wait 3 weeks in order to get one of our programs like Needy Meds to ship medicine for them, because that 3 weeks could be critical to that patient. So we made some provisions where at least you could get a very short-term amount of medication when needed, if it was on our approved list, to that patient as quick as possible, or to our client as quick as possible. But the pharmacy is paid out of the clinical services fund, as well as the third-party primary care providers.
Dale, the energy care, go back to your back one slide. Where you there where you have the physical reimbursement and then the energy care.
Yes, sir.
And others, what is others?
Other expenses?
Yeah.
Actually, I want to think that what that other expenses were in those years that you see there, it ended up being some type of equipment, if I remember the schedule correctly. By the way, I will point out, if you'll notice that 1 year up there says all of them's based on the fiscal year, but the third column, the authority uses a standard off-the-counter QuickBook system. I'd love to have a customized accounting system like you have. I really would. But they're expensive. We couldn't justify paying that for an operation as small as the authority. And when we went to pull these prior years, for whatever reason, that year that would have ended September 30th of 2020, I could only pull it through July. I don't know what happened to the other months, and I couldn't figure it out. So the rest of them are based on fiscal year. That one's a little short. But what we do, Commissioner, is we have qualification standards. An individual comes in, those standards are applied to their individual situation. If they qualify, they pick from our list of providers a primary care doctor. If they require hospitalization, they go to an approved Lakeshore Hospital Authority facility, which is now the medical center in lieu of Lakeshore at Shands. And when those services are provided, that hospital is reimbursed at the Medicaid rate. And that holds true for the medical center as well as it did for Lakeshore. Did that help you, Commissioner?
Yes, sir.
The Capital Services Fund is several trustee boards ago, maybe even Commissioner Murphy was there then. What they did is, needless to say, they're a taxing authority. So they levied a tax, which was actually paid by their tenant that was in the hospital. So the money that came from that tenant several years ago, the authority board decided, hey, we don't want to profit off of our tenant. So they would take the money that was collected off the millage levy and they put it into a capital services fund. And that money was used exclusively to pay for things back at the hospital. So CHS was there. I think all taxing authorities, they paid for both tangible personal property, ad valorem, the whole tax thing, maybe $300,000. What portion of that came back to the authority went in this account. They didn't just put it into reserves. They put it into a special fund and they reinvested it into the hospital. Because we don't have any millage levy now, we obviously zeroed this fund out. So when you see total expense, you don't see an appropriation. But that's the reason they have that fund. And when I came along, I thought that was a pretty fair and reasonable thing to do. So I certainly supported keeping that. This is the one that gets all the discussion. This is the hospital building fund. This budget was created when CHS announced that it was leaving. At that time, the authority board created a budget not to exceed $1.5 million annually, the purpose of which was to keep the hospital in an occupiable state in hopes that we could find another medical provider to enter into a lease. Obviously, we've now gone 1 year. We have not been able to secure anyone to go into a lease. And just about the time we lost the quorum on our authority board, we were about to present options where we could move from looking for hospital providers to other types of medical care that could potentially use that campus. And at some point, I've got to discuss with you, Mr. Chairman, and your manager when I can come back, bring you all up to speed on that whole process, what we've done to date, what we believe our next steps are. But if there is a goal of the authority, this should be our goal, and that is to get tenants in those buildings and eliminate this fund. That is our goal. That's exactly what we want to do. But we did budget for an entire year. It's $979,000. We never did spend $1.5 million, but we do spend a lot of money. You can see through the budget that we maintain it. We cut grass. We have security on the building. We run all of the HVAC systems. Now, the truth is that every line item there is either the same as it was when the hospital's occupied or lower, with the exception of one, and that's insurance. The vacant building, the insurance went sky high. It costs more in property coverage to insure a vacant building than it does a occupied building. But other than that, every line item is, for example, utilities. They're much lower than they were when the building was staffed and had people in it. But there are some fixed costs too. We pay the same today to have the yards mowed as we did when there was people in the hospital. We pay the same for security. So there are fixed costs, but all line items are the same or lower than they were when it was an occupied building, with the exception of insurance. But this is our target. This is what you will hear me when I get the chance to speak to you about ongoing issues with the authority and the buildings. This is the budget that we're going to be trying to attack. Now, having said that, I would ask this board, if you were to look at all those expenses I just read to you, they total $1,638,420. So we are asking, or I'm asking in behalf of Lakeshore Hospital Authority, if the board would adopt resolution number 2021 R47. It says, whereas the Columbia County Board of County Commissioners, acting as a court-appointed receiver, has tentatively adopted a 21-22 appropriations budget of $1,638,420 for the Lakeshore Hospital Authority. Now therefore be it resolved by the Columbia County Board of County Commissioners, acting as a court-appointed receiver, adopt a 2021-2022 appropriations budget in the amount of $1,638,420. So you have both the tentative budget as you had, and you have the adopted budget that's being presented in one resolution. So upon motion duly made, the signatory is for the chair and the clerk.
Mr. Chairman, I move we adopt resolution number 2021R-47.
Second.
Okay, I got a motion and a second. Or any discussion on this? We have a card. Come on. Oh, come on. Yeah. Like.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First, when the authority had the maximum amount of people, there was over 1,000 clients. There was no paid manager. Sue Fraze did it all by herself. It wasn't needed. We didn't need to pay a manager $1,000 a month, $1,000 a week in order to do something that somebody could do and didn't charge at all. The hospital authority only for a very brief time charged the Medicare rate. The rate said the hospital authority reimbursed until the Lake City Medical Center, and I don't even know if that contract was ever executed. So if you don't have a contract, they're not your provider. They never paid the Medicare rate. They paid some cockamamie formula that nobody could figure out, even experts. Number three, Mr. Williams just said he represents the hospital authority board. He doesn't represent the hospital authority board. The hospital authority doesn't have a board. The hospital authority stopped having a board, not when Dr. Thompson left, but when Shands went out of business. If you listen to what Mr. Foreman said, and I was hoping to have the minutes of that meeting, but we didn't get them yet, I don't think, is that the statute is clear, is that when the hospital authority legislation was approved, it said a member must be on the staff of Shands at Lakeshore Hospital. You have nobody on Shands at Lakeshore Hospital, Mr. Hollingsworth, and there hasn't been anybody there for quite some time. The other thing is, so I don't even know how you have the authority to do that. The other thing is, when this thing went in front of Judge Fiegel, I'd like to know why, after listening to Mr. Foreman, that this is going to be a case of first impression, that nobody's done anything like this before, that this board didn't even think to have a court reporter there to get a transcript. That's just amateur stuff. There's no record of Mr. Foreman and Mr. Cobaline, or Joe Fred Formaline, as I call them, ever appearing in front of the judge, other than, I know it's funny, other than the order that they both signed. And that order clearly is questionable. Somebody needs to intervene in that case. But I just leave you with this, and I thank you for the extra time, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Williams does not represent the hospital authority or its board, because technically there is no hospital authority and there is no board. And that's something that the clerk should be thinking about when he starts writing checks. And I will tell you, as I leave the microphone, that the clerk and I already had this discussion. So I would say tread lightly. You guys are in uncharted territory, as Mr. Foreman said, but Mr. Foreman made it clear, made sure, and the Lakeshore Hospital Authority attorney, that there was no record. So that's it. Thank you very much. I'm opposed to this. I don't think you have the legal authority to do this right now. And I guess this has to be approved by the court. Is that right, Mr. Chairman? Now that you're in receivership? Does this now have to be approved by the judge? I mean, Mr. Foreman said everything has to be approved by the judge, so I don't know.
Still, I will resort any legal questions to our attorney.
Okay, so is he going to answer?
That's up to him.
Okay,
But I would ask you to ask all your questions and then have a seat, and we'll address any of them we want to address. So, yeah.
yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you. Okay. Ms. Williams, would you like to address any of that?
I will add a little commentary if I
Okay.
may. One, as far as the authority goes, I would respectfully disagree with Mr. Lilker. The authority is the authority until such time as it's decertified, or at least that's my understanding from Tallahassee down. Now, if I said I represented the board, that was on me. but I do represent the authority. And the authority will remain an authority until such time as it's decertified. That's number one. Number two, I don't know how many clients the authority had back when Sue was with the authority. Now, I personally know Sue, and Sue's an excellent person. And I know that she had an instrumental effect on a lot of the things, and she did a great job from everything I've been told. But I will say this, back then, there really was no billing for services at all. What happened was the authority's millage was divided into 4 quarterly payments and simply remanded back. That process stayed in place for a number of years until the state auditor general got involved and said that was an illegal payment. And at some point, again, before my time, that's when the authority board started making the changes to more of the system that we have today. So there is some transition that went on, though I wasn't present, that explains part of that. So I disagree. I do believe that I represent the authority. I have no reason not to believe it. I have every reason to believe that when you adopt this budget as receiver, because this is nothing new, different, or changed in any way from what the hospital authorities previously done, that this becomes a authorized budget. Now, if you're going to make changes in some of these funds, or if you're going to add services, or you're going to delete things, I do think those have to go back to the court. And I'm basing all of what I'm telling you on what I've been told through various legal channels, various financial channels, trying to understand this myself, because I will repeat, in my 38 years and all the public budgets I've done, I've never presented one to a receiver. I've never presented one that didn't have to comply with trim requirements. But I'm trying to understand it as much as you are. So having said that, I would still ask that the board approve the resolution.
Who made a motion? I made a second.
Well, I was going to ask anybody else had anything to say, but go ahead. Make it quick, please.
Since this is uncharted territory, would it not be a good idea to have the board attorney for the county ask for an AGO opinion about the status of the board and make it an expedited opinion, since this is uncharted territory? The board can't ask our attorney to do it because we don't have a board. So I would like Attorney Foreman, on behalf of the commission, on behalf of the authority, to ask for an expedited AGO opinion to see if the board is a board or not a board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Question asked, question answered. I don't think anybody's arguing we don't have a board.
I don't either. I think it's clear we have.
I think
an
we
authority. I
agree.
think
We
we've
do
been
not
appointed
have
by
a board.
judge. Thank you, Mr. Williams.
You're now the board.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, first of all, thank you, and I appreciate again the help from county staff and helping us do or get through these things. Mr. Chairman, we at the authority now need you to come by at your convenience. We have some invoices that you need to sign. And also, I need to schedule with this board an opportunity to come and bring everybody up to speed as to where we're at, what we've done, what we're trying to do next, ask you what your suggestions are, kind of get us back where we can come up with a plan of action and work toward it.
Ms. Williams, is this something you would want to do in a regular meeting, or you want to do a workshop, or?
I'm going to defer to the board. At least the initial meeting is probably going to take a little time, just because we're going to talk
So
about
let's
a lot of
schedule a
history.
workshop for that. Do y'all have any suggestions, what time, what were you calendar look like?
I would make it a special meeting and so we could vote and not just a workshop.
Special meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm good with that. So what dates are y'all? David,
Yes.
help us out with a date on that.
How quickly do you want to do it? In the next couple of weeks, or do you want to do it?
It's basically to your liking.
Yeah, I'd like to do it sometime in the 1st of November, you
I
know,
would,
by the 15th of November.
I would say, probably that second week of November. The first week you got your board meeting on the 4th. So I would recommend sometime between the 8th and the 12th.
What works for y'all? Everybody, that's a good day. I'm good. I'm pretty much.
Oh, the 11th is Veterans Day, so you wouldn't want to do it on the 11th.
David, I'll be glad to coordinate with you as long as we have the
November 12th, work for you?
time to do the appropriate advertising. I think we're good, or I'm good.
Right.
Let's do 10th,
We'll do 10th.
Wednesday.
I would say the 10th or the 9th would probably be best.
Let's do the 10th, the Wednesday of the 10th.
Do you want it during the day or at night?
I would. During the day? 9 o'clock?
Anything you want.
9 o'clock on the 10th. How about that?
All right.
Can
And
I
we
get
will
a-
check the availability of the building and get back to everybody involved.
Okay, do we need to do any kind of motion or anything on that?
Can't hurt.
Okay, can I get a motion to do a special meeting for the Lakeshore Hospital Authority?
So move.
Second,
Second.
got a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye. David, if the building's not available, I would assume we'd probably have it over there at the hospital authorities.
I would assume that the hospital authority would be amenable to that.
And I want to extend an invitation too. I know that Commissioner Murphy, he's well aware of them, but any of y'all that would like to come over and tour the hospital or those ancillary buildings, please feel free to come. We'll be glad to give you the tour. And we'll be talking about those when we meet. So if you would like some historical knowledge of them or whatever, anytime between now and then, we'll make it work. So like for you to come by and look. Okay,
Sounds good.
thank you, Mr. Chairman, Board.
Thank you. Okay,
Mr. Chairman?
yes.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman,
Oh, okay, hold on.
real quick, can I ask for a quick 5-minute recess while Carl packs up his stuff?
Yeah, I'd be fine. Okay, we got a 5-minute recess.